Something very interesting in this is he just flat comes right out and admits the WNBA cannot afford to pay these players big salaries. He comes right out and admits it, that the structure, the way the business is set up, they don't make enough money. They don't make enough money.
Mark Cuban just said the quiet part out loud. The WNBA can't afford to pay its players what they're asking for. Not won't, can't. And coming from a guy who owned an NBA franchise for over 2 decades, who's made billions in business deals, who literally evaluates companies for a living on Shark Tank, that admission changes everything about these CBA negotiations. His post went viral within hours, 750,000 views in the first couple hours. And the reason it's blowing up isn't just because he's famous. It's because he's proposing something that sounds absolutely insane on the surface, that the WNBA should copy college basketball's NIL model instead of trying to be like the NBA.
Revenue payment for players and change how this entire system is done. Now, here's the problem, and he tries to say that, well, there's college players coming into the league that's giving up a ton of money because they're coming into the league. Well, because of NIL deals, and there's some big ones. That's happening in the NFL. It's happening in all sports, but it's happening even in the juggernaut NFL. For example, 7th round of the NFL draft last year.
Here's the problem he's identifying. Top college women's basketball players are making between $500,000 and $1.2 million per year right now. That's not a rumor. Cuban says he asked multiple athletic directors what the going rate is for a star player on a power conference team, $500,000 to $1.2 million in college. Meanwhile, the WNBA rookie salary is $76,000. The Supermax is around $240,000. You see the issue? Paige Buchers is making more money at UConn than she will her first 3 years in the WNBA combined. That's not a sustainable model when you're trying to convince elite talent to go pro. And this isn't unique to women's basketball. Quinn Ewers turned down $8 million from North Carolina and Bill Belichick to enter the NFL draft, where he got picked in the 7th round for a 4-year, $5 million deal. College NIL money is now competing directly with professional leagues across all sports.
Just letting you know. And you can get a good education if you work at it. It's all subsidized by donors and shared school revenues, which makes it more similar to Europe, where companies subsidize teams than to the WNBA. In the NBA, a team can't go to a sponsor and negotiate a direct payment deal for a player. In college, they effectively can with NIL money. When I've written checks to IU, Indiana University, I knew which players they were trying to get with the money. The WNBA needs to look at allowing the same thing.
But here's where Cuban's proposal gets interesting. He's not saying the WNBA should just pay players more. He's saying they literally cannot. The league doesn't have the revenue. The teams don't have the cash flow from tickets, sponsorships, and TV deals to support bigger salaries using traditional league economics. His exact words, the WNBA teams don't have the margin dollars from ticket sponsors and shared revenue like TV to pay bigger salaries using their own cash flow. That's a former NBA owner telling you the business model is fundamentally broken. The new media rights deal is $240 million per year. Sounds impressive until you realize the NBA just signed for $7.7 billion annually, with a B. So Cuban's solution is radical. Let teams go directly to local sponsors and negotiate NIL-style deals for players, separate from team salary. A car dealership in New York pays Sabrina Ionescu $50,000 for a commercial. A tech company in San Francisco gives Steph Curry's sister a sponsorship deal. The team facilitates it. The sponsor pays the player directly, and it doesn't come out of the team's operating budget.
Let the teams go to local sponsors and work out payments to players as part of a sponsorship package. By the way, somebody very astutely in the comments brought up the Las Vegas Aces tried to do something like this, and the league nailed them for it. Nailed them for it. The big-name players have agents to do this. The rest make minimal amounts with or without an agent. Let the WNBA teams pay NIL money to its players. It's counterintuitive for the NBA folks. But here's the issue. And he's just going to admit.
Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't the Las Vegas Aces get hammered for doing exactly this? Yes, they absolutely did. The league investigated them for supplementing player salaries through outside arrangements. which is precisely why Cuban is saying the WNBA needs to make this legal and structured. His proposal includes caps based on years of experience. A rookie can get up to X amount in NIL deals. A veteran can get up to Y amount. You create structure so it's not the Wild West, but you allow teams to leverage their local markets and sponsor relationships to get more money to players without destroying the league's financial model. He even addresses the competitive balance issue head-on. A Chevrolet commercial in Phoenix isn't worth what it is in New York. The Phoenix player might get $7,000 for the same spot that pays the New York player $50,000. That's just market reality. So Cuban suggests requiring a percentage of NIL money go into a pool for revenue sharing across all teams, similar to how jersey patch sponsorships work in the NBA.
The WNBA can't afford to pay bigger salaries. The WNBA teams don't have the margin dollars from tickets, sponsors, and shared revenue like TV to pay bigger salaries using their own cash flow. He just told you the W ain't got the money. Well, all the players keep saying, yeah, they do, yeah, they do, yeah, they do. Mark Cuban knows for a fact they do not. Some teams, and let's be real, the Indiana Fever, San Francisco,
Think about what he's really saying here. The WNBA needs to stop pretending it's the NBA and start operating more like European soccer clubs, where companies subsidize teams and players as part of broader marketing strategies, or like college athletics, where boosters and sponsors fund player compensation outside the traditional payroll structure. It's counterintuitive for anyone who understands how the NBA works. In the NBA, teams cannot go to a sponsor and negotiate a direct payment deal for a player. That would be circumventing the salary cap. But in college, that's exactly how NIL works. Cuban says he's written checks to Indiana University, knowing exactly which players they were trying to recruit with that money, and it's completely legal. The WNBA is stuck between two worlds. It wants to operate like a major professional league with traditional salary structures and collective bargaining, but it doesn't have the revenue to support that model at the compensation levels players deserve. Meanwhile, college basketball has figured out how to get serious money to elite players through creative sponsor arrangements.
just being honest. It's the way it is. They can have great addressable market sponsors for market for sponsors. The WNBA would require that some percentage of the NIL money deals go into a pool for a version of a revenue share. This is effectively what happens with jersey ads. I remember advocating that jersey ads be split among all teams because the greatest value to sponsors does not come from local TV or games, but from national TV, playoffs, and jersey sales. All right, so, and here you go. This guy said right here.
Let's talk about who wins and who loses under this system. The stars with agents and marketability. They win big. Caitlin Clark is already making $16 million annually from sponsorships. Under Cuban's model, the Indiana Fever could actively help her secure more local deals, facilitate those relationships, and she'd make even more on top of her WNBA salary. But what about the role players? The bench players who aren't household names? Cuban admits they'd make minimal amounts with or without an agent, which is honestly the same situation they're in now. The difference is, the stars wouldn't be artificially capped by a salary structure the league can't afford to raise significantly. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Maybe 3 teams in the WNBA are actually profitable right now. The Indiana Fever after the Caitlin Clark effect. Probably the New York Liberty with their new arena and market size. Golden State might be printing money with their Warriors infrastructure. But the rest? They're likely losing money every season, subsidized by their NBA parent organizations or wealthy owners willing to take losses.
I understand that. I mean, to be honest, I get that way of thinking too. Look, if you can't generate the revenue as a league, is the league truly successful? And you're always, no matter what, you're going to have the haves and the have-nots. That's just the way it is. All right. Now, whether or not that would you heard what he said, based on player experience, a cap number. What happens to a player like Caitlin Clark that walks into the league bigger than everybody put together? And she's making like, what is it? $16 million. I think I did a video from sponsorships. aka NIL, kind of. Basically, same thing. What happens? All of a sudden, she got to get rid of sponsors because she got to get under the cap?
You can see why this proposal is controversial. Some people in the comments are saying if the league can't generate revenue to pay players properly, shut it down. That's one perspective. If you can't sustain a business model, should that business exist? It's harsh, but it's a legitimate economic argument. Others are pointing out this creates massive inequality between big market and small market teams. The Las Vegas Aces, New York Liberty, and Los Angeles Sparks would dominate NIL opportunities. What happens to teams in Connecticut or Indiana? Well, actually, Indiana just became a massive market because of one player, but you get the point. Small market teams would struggle to compete for talent if compensation is tied to local sponsorship value. But Cuban's counterargument is that competitive imbalance already exists, and at least this model gets more money to players without bankrupting teams. You can have a perfectly balanced league where everyone makes $70,000, or you can have an unbalanced league where stars make serious money and the league actually survives long-term. Pick one. Here's what makes this particularly relevant right now. The WNBA and the Players Union are in active CBA negotiations. The Players' counterproposal just dropped, and it's asking for significant salary increases across the board. Which sounds great until you run the numbers against actual league revenue. The current CBA has a 50-50 revenue split between players and the league. Sounds fair. Except the league has been operating at a loss for most of its existence, subsidized by the NBA. The new $240 million annual media rights deal changes the math somewhat, but we're talking about a league where total revenue is maybe $300 million per year trying to support 12 teams and 144 roster spots. Do the math on what fair salaries would look like if you're trying to compete with college NIL money. If every player averaged even $200,000, which is still less than top college players make, you're talking about $29 million just in player salaries before you pay coaches, staff, travel, facilities, marketing, or any other operating costs. And that assumes every player makes the same amount, which would never happen. Cuban's proposal acknowledges this math doesn't work under traditional models. So instead of fighting economic reality, change the model. Let sponsors pay players directly for marketing value. Let teams facilitate those relationships. Cap it to prevent complete chaos. Pool some of it for revenue sharing. And suddenly you can get real money to players without requiring the league itself to generate NBA-level revenue. The Las Vegas Aces situation is instructive here. They got investigated and penalized for doing something very similar to what Cuban is now proposing. The league saw it as circumventing the salary cap and creating unfair competitive advantage, but maybe the league had it backwards. Maybe the Aces were ahead of the curve, recognizing that traditional salary structures don't work for the WNBA's economic reality. Think about Caitlin Clark's situation specifically. She's making $16 million in endorsements. The Fever pay her $76,000 in salary. The disconnect is absurd. Under Cuban's model, the Fever could actively help her secure more local sponsorships, facilitate appearances, negotiate deals with Indiana-based companies, and get her compensation closer to her actual market value, all without paying it out of the team's operating budget. Now here's where it gets complicated. What happens when you have a player like Clark, who walks into the league bigger than everyone else? Cuban suggests caps based on years of experience, but that means Clark might have to turn down sponsorship opportunities to stay under the rookie cap. Is that fair? She's generating more value than 10-year veterans. Should her compensation be artificially limited because she's new to the league? You could argue she's already getting her money from national sponsors like Nike and Gatorade, so the local team-facilitated deals would be supplementary. But you could also argue that artificially capping anyone's earning potential based on tenure rather than value is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps WNBA salaries depressed in the first place. The European soccer model Cuban references is worth examining. Top soccer clubs are often owned by billionaires or corporations who subsidize operations as part of broader business strategies. Players get paid by the club, but also have separate sponsorship deals with companies that partner with the club. It's a complex web of financial relationships that gets money to players through multiple channels. College athletics already works this way in America. Boosters donate to NIL collectives. Schools facilitate relationships between players and local businesses. Coaches know exactly which players are getting how much money and from whom, even if they're not supposed to officially coordinate it. The WNBA could formalize and structure this same approach. But there's a philosophical question underlying all of this. Should professional sports leagues operate as traditional businesses that need to be profitable, or as entertainment products subsidized by wealthy owners and parent organizations because society values having elite women's basketball? The NBA lost money for years before becoming profitable. The WNBA is 28 years old and still operating at a loss. At some point, you either commit to subsidizing it indefinitely, figure out how to make the economics work, or shut it down. Cuban's proposal is option 2, a creative restructuring that acknowledges economic reality while still getting more money to players. It's not perfect, it creates inequality, it advantages big markets, but it might be the only viable path forward that doesn't require NBA owners to subsidize WNBA losses forever. The players' union will likely resist this proposal because it undermines collective bargaining power. If players are getting paid through individual NIL deals rather than collectively bargained salaries, the union has less leverage. But the counterargument is that collective bargaining for higher salaries doesn't matter if the league can't afford to pay them. You can negotiate all you want, but you can't negotiate money that doesn't exist. So where does this leave the CBA negotiations? Cuban's viral post puts pressure on both sides to address the fundamental economic model rather than just arguing over percentages of revenue that may not materialize. The players want more money, absolutely justified given their talent and the growth of women's sports. The league says it can't afford traditional salary increases, apparently true based on actual revenue numbers. Something has to give. Cuban's proposal might not be the final answer, but it's opened up a conversation about creative solutions beyond just pay them more or the league is broke, deal with it. Maybe the future of the WNBA looks more like college athletics or European soccer than the NBA. Maybe that's okay if it results in players actually getting paid closer to their value. Or maybe this whole proposal is a non-starter that ignores why players wanted a professional league with real salaries and benefits in the first place. What's clear is that the current model isn't working. Top college players are taking pay cuts to go pro. The league operates at a loss despite growing popularity. And now you have one of the savviest sports business minds in the country saying the whole structure needs to change. Whether the WNBA and the Players Union are willing to consider something this radical remains to be seen. But Cuban just forced everyone to confront the uncomfortable math that's been lurking underneath these negotiations all along. The WNBA can't afford to pay players what they're worth under traditional models. That's not opinion. That's a former NBA owner looking at the revenue numbers and telling you the math doesn't work. So either you change the model, you accept below-market salaries, or you shut down the league. Those are the options. Cuban's proposing option 1. The players seem to want option 2, with higher numbers, and there are people in the comments arguing for option 3. This CBA negotiation is going to be fascinating to watch, because something fundamental has to change. The status quo isn't sustainable when college players make more than pros.